retirement home, tried to hide its black nurse, then needed her on the evening news. The first time they told her she would not be in the photos, she pretended not to mind. Her name was Laverne Carter, 54 years old, brown skin, soft eyes, strong back. 28 years in nursing, hospital nights, double shifts, rehab units. Then finally this place, which everyone in town called Maple Ridge Retirement Community, as if those 4 words guaranteed safety. She started there for a simple reason. Her own mother had once said, "If I ever end up in a home, I pray there'll be a nurse who actually looks at me when she talks." That sentence stayed with her. When a case manager mentioned an opening at Maple Ridge, Laverne thought, maybe I can be that person for somebody's mother. The building itself looked pleasant from the outside. Brick and beige siding, wide windows, a few maple trees fighting for life in 2 small squares of soil. The brochure was even nicer. Glossy paper, golden light, smiling gray-haired couples playing cards, a piano in the corner, a nurse in pale blue scrubs pouring tea for a white woman with perfectly brushed hair. That nurse in the brochure was not Laverne. She found that out on her second week, when a young woman from marketing visited the unit with a photographer in tow. The administrator, Mr. Dalton, a man with silver hair that never moved, and a tie that always matched the flowers in the lobby, walked with them. "Let's get some shots on the second floor," he said. "Families love the view from the sunroom." Residents were gathered by the windows. The marketing woman arranged them like furniture. She pointed to Mr. George, a retired postman, and asked him to move closer to the deck doors. She patted Mrs. Evans, who always wore pearls, on the shoulder and turned her chair slightly toward the camera. Laverne was finishing a blood pressure check when the photographer raised his camera. She took 1 step back, slightly to the side, making sure she wasn't blocking anyone. The marketing woman glanced at her, then at Mr. Dalton. Her smile did not change, but her voice dropped 1/2 inch. "Maybe for this set we just have residents," she said. "We really want families to focus on the home feeling, not the medical side." Laverne nodded and moved out of frame. It wasn't the first time in her career someone had wanted the care without showing the people who provided it. A week later, she found the new brochure in the staff lounge. The sunroom photo was right on the first page. Mrs. Evans had made the cut, her pearls gleaming. Mr. George was there too, his postal shoulders still straight. In the background stood a nurse in pale blue scrubs, smiling toward the group. It took Laverne a moment to realize that nurse had been edited in. Different uniform, different face. Younger, thinner, and, she couldn't help noticing, white. She looked at the picture for a long time, then quietly folded the brochure and placed it on the table. It might have ended there, as one more small thing to swallow, if it hadn't been for all the other small things that followed. Whenever families were scheduled for tours, she started to notice a pattern. If she was at the front desk, Dalton would step out of his office and suddenly decide that, "It's a good time to check that order in the supply room, Laverne." If she was in the hall, he would say, "Can you finish that later? Mrs. Klein, why don't you show them your crafts instead?" On tour days, they seemed to prefer a certain lineup: a young white aide with a neat ponytail, a male nurse from the day shift who could talk sports with the husbands, Dalton himself, walking ahead like a cruise director. Laverne was always busy somewhere else. No one said out loud that families expected a certain image. but she heard phrases drift down the hallway from meetings she wasn't invited to. They want to feel like they're in a hotel, not a clinic. We need to project stability, like the brochure. Certain faces just resonate better in this market. She would go back to her charting, lips pressed together, and decide which mattered more in that moment. Correcting their language or making sure Mr. Johnson's blood sugar was checked on time. The residents did not see the brochures. They saw Laverne. They saw her on the mornings when the alarm went off at 5, and her body protested, but she still arrived with soft, "Good morning, my love," for the woman who hadn't slept well. They saw her when she sat at the bedside of a former teacher whose mind wandered back to classrooms that no longer existed. They saw her on Sunday afternoons when the building was quiet and the clock seemed to slow down, but she still came in to wash hair and trim nails. If you ask them who worked at Maple Ridge, many would say, first, that nurse with the green sweater, even though her uniform was the same pale blue as everyone else's, and the green sweater only came out in winter. Families noticed her too, slowly. It started with small things. A daughter overheard the way Laverne reminded her mother of the right words during a memory lapse without making a big show of it. A son watched her kneel down to fix his father's shoe without rushing, even though the medication cart waited. A granddaughter saw her hold the hand of a woman who was fading, humming an old church song under her breath when the monitors stopped. They did not know that Laverne often took the shifts no one wanted. Nights, holidays, storm days, when younger staff found reasons to call out. She did it partly for the paycheck, yes, but also because she knew the residents would still wake up at 3 in the morning needing a glass of water or company or both. The trouble arrived on a Wednesday in late autumn. It began like many troubles do in such places, quietly. A stomach bug, someone joked. Just a little virus. One woman complained of nausea, another had diarrhea. It wasn't unusual. Elderly bodies were fragile. But then more residents started to suffer. Fever, dehydration, confusion worse than their usual confusion. Laverne entered symptom after symptom into the electronic charting system. She called the on-call doctor at home more times than he liked. She noticed that the ones getting sick quickest were those on one specific wing, the one closest to the kitchen and the dining room. "Something's wrong," she told the charge nurse. "This isn't just random." They checked the cleaning logs. They checked the food temperatures. Everything in the digital records looked fine. On paper, Maple Ridge was spotless. In reality, Laverne had seen more than once a rushed aide skip proper hand washing because a call bell was ringing. She had seen a tray placed down in a hallway while someone fixed a bed rail. None of it looked dramatic. But over time, in a building full of weakened immune systems, small shortcuts grew teeth. She filled out incident reports. She flagged patterns. She asked, more than once, whether they should temporarily close the dining room and serve meals in rooms until they understood the source. Mr. Dalton did not like the sound of closing the dining room. "Families panic when they hear that," he said in the staff meeting. "They picture quarantine zones and hazmat suits. We need to keep things calm. The last thing we want is rumors." He talked about managing perception and controlling the narrative. He reminded everyone that Maple Ridge prided itself on stability. "We'll increase sanitizing," he said. "We'll remind everyone to follow protocol. but let's not overreact. Overreact. Laverne looked at the list of residents she had treated that week and thought about who did and did not have room left to react at all. The local health department eventually got involved. Too many hospital transfers in too few days. Too many charts mentioning the same symptoms. Inspectors walked the halls with clipboards and serious eyes. They asked for logs, for policies, for training documents that had looked very impressive in those meetings months before. Some things did not match. The training log said all staff had yearly refreshers on infection control. Half the aides shrugged and said they didn't remember any such thing this year. The documentation showed 3 housekeepers on the evening shift. Most nights there were only 2. The phrase, possible outbreak, began to appear in conversations. Families started to ask harder questions. Why wasn't my father's wing locked down sooner? Why did you still hold group activities when people were already sick? When were we going to be told the truth? Dalton's voice, once so smooth, began to crack at the edges. He talked about unfortunate coincidences and isolated issues. But the families were not looking at him much anymore. They were watching Laverne. She didn't plan to become the center of anything. She kept doing what she always did, checking vitals, coaxing sips of water, changing sheets, comforting those who were frightened and those who were too tired to be. But the residents trusted her. When their children called, they often asked to speak with the black nurse, the one who knows mom's routine. She found herself on the phone more and more, explaining symptoms, translating medical language into plain words. "I'm not going to lie to you," she would say. "Things are serious, but we're doing everything we can. Let me tell you exactly what that is." One of those calls happened to be with a woman whose sister worked for the local TV station. The station had already heard rumors of problems at Maple Ridge. A few emergency room nurses had whispered off the record about residents being brought in from the same facility. An assignment editor had made a note. But so many stories floated through a newsroom, not all of them landed. Then someone said, "My sister's father is there. She keeps talking about one nurse who tells the truth even when the admins won't." The idea of the story changed shape. It wasn't just about a possible outbreak now. It was about who inside the building people trusted and who they did not. A producer called Maple Ridge, asking for comment. Dalton, hearing the word camera, felt the ground shift beneath him. "We are more than happy to talk," he said, trying to sound in control. "I can walk you through our protocols. We want families to feel reassured." The producer was polite but firm. They were planning an in-depth segment. They wanted to speak not only with management, but with staff and families. Off the record, he already knew which nurse everyone trusted. The administrators at Maple Ridge held an emergency meeting. "We need someone media-friendly," said the marketing woman, the same one who had once watched Laverne step out of the sunroom photo. "Someone who can communicate our values and calm people down." She glanced at Dalton. Dalton glanced at the department heads. No one said Laverne's name. "Our Dawn could do it," someone suggested, mentioning the director of nursing. The Dawn was competent, but she had been hired only 6 months ago. Residents barely knew her, families even less. "I think families will want to hear from someone they recognize," said the social worker quietly. "Right," Dalton said quickly. "But we need to be careful. One wrong sentence on live TV, and we're in real trouble." The social worker chose her next words carefully. Right now, the wrong sentence is no comment, she said. And the only person I see residents and families calling by name over and over is Laverne. The room went still for a moment, like a held breath. Dalton shifted in his chair. For years he had been comfortable with Laverne's reliability in the background. She covered shifts. She cleaned up messes. She built relationships he could mention vaguely in annual reports. He had never planned for her to be the face of the building. We have to think about optics, the marketing woman said at last. The camera can be very unforgiving. We, families, expect a certain... Families expect the truth, the social worker interrupted, more sharply than usual. And she's the one they trust to give it. In the end, pressure from above and outside made the decision for them. The health department wanted transparency. Families were organizing in group chats. The station made it clear that if Maple Ridge refused to cooperate, they'd run the story anyway with interviews from outside. Dalton went to the nurse's station, minty breath and worried smile in place. Laverne, he said, you're very respected here. Residents look up to you. We were thinking it might be helpful if you spoke on camera. As part of the team, of course, to show we're all on the same page. She looked at him for a long beat. On the same page? She asked quietly. Or reading from the same script? He laughed, a sound a bit too high. We just want to reassure people, he said. We don't want unnecessary alarm. She thought about the residents in isolation, about the ones who had already been taken to the hospital. She thought about the incident reports she had filed that went nowhere. She thought about the brochure on glossy paper with the nurse, who wasn't her. You know I'm not going to lie, she said. He hesitated, then forced the smile wider. Of course, he said. We all just want to frame things constructively. Word spread quickly that cameras were coming. On the day of the interview, the sky outside was a flat gray. The TV van parked near the main entrance. Cables snaked across the lobby. A makeup artist dabbed powder on Dalton's forehead. Another offered to do the same for Laverne. She declined. She wore her usual scrubs, clean and pressed, with her name badge clipped where it always was. She did put on the green sweater her residents liked, the one they said made her look like spring even in December. They filmed B-roll first, shots of the hallway, the dining room, the hand sanitizer dispensers that had suddenly multiplied overnight. Then they sat Dalton and Laverne down in a corner of the lounge with 2 chairs and a small table between them. The interviewer began with Dalton, letting him talk about commitment to safety, about policies, about an unfortunate cluster of illnesses that we have swiftly addressed. Then he turned to Laverne. He did not ask her for slogans. He asked her what the last few weeks had been like. She took a breath and answered the way she always spoke to families, slowly, clearly, without drama and without sugarcoating. She described the first cases, the growing list of names, the long nights, the extra baths, the fluids coaxed sip by sip. She talked about how infection spreads in places where people are fragile, and the line between okay and not okay is thinner than most realize. The interviewer asked whether staff had raised concerns before the health department got involved. Yes, she said simply. We did. He asked if she felt heard. She did not look at Dalton when she answered. Not at first, she said. We had documentation. We reported patterns. But it took more calls, more hospitalizations, and families pushing for answers before things really changed. He asked what she wanted families to know now. She looked straight into the camera. I want them to know that there are people in this building who love their parents and grandparents, who fight for them, who are proud to care for them, she said. I also want them to know that when we say something is wrong, we need support, not silence. Infection control isn't a slogan. It's work. And if we are understaffed or rushed, it shows up, first, in the people who can't speak for themselves. In the editing room later, the station could have cut her words differently. They could have used only the comforting parts. They didn't. They let her full sentences stand. The segment aired that night on the evening news. Residents who were well enough watched from their rooms. Families watched at home. Former employees watched too, recognizing halls they had walked. Laverne's face filled the screen. Serious, tired, calm. The nurse who had been edited out of the brochure was now the only staff member many viewers remembered. Calls flooded Maple Ridge after the broadcast. Some were angry, demanding immediate changes. Some were grateful, thanking that nurse for speaking honestly. A few said, "If she leaves, we're taking our mother out too." The health department returned, this time with more authority. Staffing ratios were reviewed. Training schedules were enforced. Shortcuts that had been quietly tolerated for years came under bright light. Dalton's name appeared less often after that. Eventually, the board announced a leadership transition. Maple Ridge got a new administrator, one who started her tenure by meeting not just with department heads, but with residents and their families. The brochure was redesigned. This time, they did not use stock images. A photographer spent a full day on the units, capturing real interactions. When the new brochure came out months later, it showed Mrs. Evans knitting, Mr. Johnson laughing at a joke, and, on one page, Laverne sitting at a bedside, holding someone's hand. She did not ask for that picture. She did not feel flattered. She felt something more complicated, like the closing of a circle that should never have been left open in the first place. Life in the building did not become perfect. No place where people age and die ever is. But there were changes. When staff raised concerns about supplies or cleanliness now, someone took notes. When a nurse filled out an incident report, it did not vanish into a filing cabinet. And when families came for tours, they sometimes asked, "Is Nurse Carter on today? We saw her on the news. We'd like to meet the person who actually takes care of people here." On those days, she would wipe her hands, step into the lobby, and look them in the eye. No one tried to send her to the supply room when the camera of a worried daughter was a cell phone, not a TV crew. In the end, the story people told about Maple Ridge often started with the scandal, with the outbreak, with the news van in the parking lot. But, for those who paid closer attention, the real story was simpler and sharper. For years, the home had tried to hide its black nurse from the front of the picture because they believed families expected something else. When the truth finally mattered more than the image, she was the only one they trusted to stand in front of the lens and tell it.